Before the universe existed, what was there? No space, no time, not even darkness. Because even darkness needs space to exist in. So what does before actually means if nothing exists at all? We are told that universe began around 13.8 billion years ago with the Big Bang. But that immediately creates a deeper question. What came before it? Because in ordinary life, everything seems to have a cause. Everything has a past. So, why should the universe be any different? First, we need to clear up a common misunderstanding. The Big Bang was not an explosion in space. It was the expansion of space itself. There was no center where it happened, no edge that it expanded into, and no outside waiting for it. Everything expanded everywhere at the same time. So, when people imagine the Big Bang as a fireball exploding into empty darkness, that picture is misleading. It was not an explosion inside the universe. It was the beginning of the universe as we know it. Now, here is where things become strange. Time itself is part of the universe. In modern physics, space and time are linked together in what we call spacetime. So, if spacetime begins with the Big Bang, then asking what happened before it may be like asking what is north of the North Pole. The grammar of the question sounds normal, but the concept may break down. If time itself begins there, then before may not be a real thing at all. One possible answer is simple but uncomfortable. There was no before, time itself began at the Big Bang. That means the universe did not come from an earlier moment. Instead, it marked the beginning of earlier and later themselves. This is difficult to accept because our minds are built around sequence before, after, cause, effect. But at the origin of the universe, those familiar categories may not apply in the way we expect, and that is one of the hardest ideas in cosmology. The beginning of the universe may also be the beginning of time itself, but science does not stop there. At very small scale, the universe behaves in a way that seems strange to common sense. In quantum physics, the particles can appear and disappear in ways that does not match ordinary intuition. Because of this, some scientists have proposed that the universe may have emerged from a quantum event. But we have to be careful here. When people hear that universe comes from nothing, they usually imagine absolute nothingness. This is not really what physicists mean. The kind of nothing is still tied to laws, fields, and a deeper physical framework. So even if a quantum origin explains part of the story, it leaves us with another question. Where did the laws themselves come from? In other words, the mystery does not disappear, it just moves one level deeper. Another idea challenges the assumption that the universe begins only once. Some models suggest that universe may go through cycles, expansion, contraction, and then another beginning, over and over again. In this picture, the Big Bang would not be the absolute beginning of everything. It would simply be the beginning of overcurrent phase of cosmos. This idea is attractive because it avoids the problem of a single starting point, but it also raises new questions. If universe repeats forever, what drives those cycles? And does an endless cycle really remove the mystery or just spread it across eternity? Then there is another possibility. What if our universe is not the only one? So, some theories suggest that universes could emerge from a larger reality, almost like bubbles forming within a bigger cosmic system. If that were true, then our Big Bang may not have been the beginning of everything. It may only have been the beginning of our universe. But this idea also pushes the question back rather than solving it, because then we would still need to ask, where did the larger reality comes from? And at that point, we find ourselves once again standing at the edge of what science can presently explain. So, by now, we have several possibilities. Maybe there was no before. Maybe the universe emerged from a quantum process. Maybe it is part of an endless cycle. Or maybe it is one universe among many. Science gives us powerful models, but when we ask what comes before the beginning of time itself, we start approaching the boundaries where physics meet philosophy. This is exactly where religious perspectives become especially interesting. Science usually asks, how did the universe begin? Religion often asks a different question. Why does the universe exist at all? Those are not always the same question, and they do not always try to give the same kind of answer. In Islam, the universe is understood as a deliberate creation of God. A verse often discussed in relation to cosmos origin says that the heavens and the earth were once joined together and then split apart. From many believers and commentators, the point is not to offer a modern physics formula, but to affirm that the universe has a real beginning under divine will. In Christianity, the opening of Genesis begins with the word "in the beginning", presenting the universe as something brought into existence by God. The text then describes the earth as formless and empty before the order is established. Again, the center point is purposeful creation, not a technical scientific mechanism. Judaism shares the same Genesis creation framework, where the universe is not random or self explaining, but intentionally brought into being and order. In that reading, creation is meaningful, structured, and grounded into divine action. So, while science asks what happened at the beginning, the Abrahamic traditions often ask who willed that beginning and what that beginning means. But not all religious traditions describe cosmic origins in the same way. The Hindu traditions, one recurring theme is cyclic creation and dissolution. The cosmos is not necessarily a one time event. It may unfold in repeating cycles of manifestation and return. That makes Hindu cosmology especially interesting to compare with modern cyclic universe idea. Even though underlying frameworks are very different. In Buddhist thought, a striking idea appears in the doctrine of samsara. The cycle of wandering on is described as being without a discoverable beginning. That means the focus is not always on identifying a first starting point of existence, but one understanding the nature of conditioned existence itself. In Norse mythology, the creation begins from Tunanga Gap, a primordial void. From that vast gap, the first stage of cosmic formation emerged. This gives us yet another model, not a scientific cosmology, but a mythic version of order emerging from a primal emptiness. So, across traditions, we find very different answers. A universe created once with purpose, a universe that unfolds in cycles, a reality with no discoverable beginning, or a world emerging from a primordial void. Each perspective reflects a different way of asking what existence itself means. So, what was before the Big Bang? The most honest answer is we don't know. Maybe there was no before. Maybe the question points to a deeper physical reality. Maybe it leads us into philosophy, or maybe it leads us into theology. But perhaps the most important thing is this: the closer we move towards the beginning of everything, the more mysterious everything begins. And maybe this is why the question has fascinated both the scientists and the believers for so long. For more, please subscribe.